One of Hippocrates' most quoted statements is that all disease begins in the gut. In our lecture, I'm going to take you through the gut. We're going to start with the mouth, and I'm going to take you on a journey all the way through your gastrointestinal tract. It's about 8 meters long, and anything that goes into your gastrointestinal tract is not part of you or me until it gets broken down into tiny little substances absorbed into the blood. Then it becomes part of the life of the flesh, and actually one of the reasons why the blood is called the life of the flesh. So what I'm going to look at in this presentation is I'm going to go through this amazing process that changes the food that's on our plate to microscopic substances that can now go into the blood and be taken to what we often call the CBD, the central business district of the human body, the inside workings of the cell. So let us begin with the mouth. The mouth is the only part of our gastrointestinal tract where we have say. We have say over what goes in, we have say over how much goes in, we have say over how long it actually stays in the mouth, and we also have say over the environment that is surrounding us when we eat. Notice with the mouth too, it's the only part in the body where there's exposed bone, and this exposed bone, of course, is the teeth. And the teeth play a very important role in digestion because the teeth's main role is to break the food up into tiny little particles. You see, the tinier the particles are broken up, the larger the surface area is for the gastric enzymes to work on. So very important that we chew, chew, chew. And in this very fast society, many people eat just too fast. And there's no teeth anywhere else in our gastrointestinal tract. This is the only place where it can be chewed. So very important to chew the food very well. In the mouth, the pH is alkaline. And one food that's broken down in the mouth is starch. So starch would be all the cereals, breads, biscuits, pastas, things like that. And the enzyme that breaks down the starch is ptyalin. Ptyalin is an amylase, and it's the enzyme that breaks down starch. The first teeth that we got were 4 at the top and 4 at the bottom. Those teeth are called milk teeth, and they usually appear between 7 and 8, 9, 10 months of age. Some babies don't get their teeth till even 11 months of age. They're called milk teeth because that's all babies should be having, is milk. But it's also taste time. That's a good time to get your baby used to tastes. I used to give my babies a lump of apple in a little net bag and they could suck away on that, or I'd chew or cut all the corn off a cob of corn and give them that and they suck away on that. So this is taste time because baby's main food should be milk. The next teeth that appear are the molars, and the molars come through a little bit further back. And when the molars come through, and remember they're the grinders, when the molars come through, then the glands release ptyalin. And ptyalin is the enzyme that breaks down starch. You know what this means? And this is just basic anatomy and physiology. It means no baby should have any form of starch until the molars are fully through. Now that can be anywhere from 14 months of age to even 22 months of age. And what are most mothers told to give their babies? 4 to 6 months. Starch, cereal, rice cereal, pure starch. And what that does is it sets up malabsorption syndrome in the gut because the baby has no ability to break it down. You see, the signs that a baby is ready to eat is that they can sit, they can pick up the food, but that's not enough because a lot of babies can do that by 8, 10 months of age. The last sign is the teeth. The teeth are the guide. The only other food that's broken down in the mouth is saturated fat. Saturated fats, and I'm particularly referring to the coconut oil, the best, has got medium chain fatty acids and short chain fatty acids. And it's the medium and the short chain fatty acids that are broken down in the mouth. Underneath the tongue there are sublingual glands, and those sublingual glands release lingual lipase. And lingual lipase particularly or specifically is the lipase that breaks down your medium and your short chain fatty acids. That's the only digestion that happens in the mouth. The other fats, they're broken down later on. Now we come down into the stomach. That is the next point of stoppage for your food. Notice that the food comes through the cardiac sphincter. It's called the cardiac sphincter because of its relationship to the heart. And it's a muscle. And if that muscle's not working well, the acid from the stomach can come up. One lady said, I have a very acid stomach. I said, how do you know? And by the way, we should all have an acid stomach because it's only in an acid stomach that the stomach enzymes can work. This lady said, well, it comes up all the time. That doesn't mean you got too much acid. It means there's something wrong with your cardiac sphincter. And one of the reasons cardiac sphincters get weak is because people are eating their main meal at night. And have a look at what happens when you eat your main meal at night and then you lie down. The food basically is like this, and then it starts pushing against this cardiac sphincter and weakens it. That's why when we lay down to sleep, our stomach should be able to sleep as well. But we have such a fast society today. People have no time for breakfast, no time for lunch. And by the end of the day, they're very hungry. They eat too much. They sit in their easy chair and fall asleep. Also, this is a muscle. And when it's relaxed, it's closed. When it tightens, it opens. So stress too can cause it to open. Magnesium relaxes muscles. So magnesium can help to relax that muscle and keep it closed. So what's now happening in the stomach? There's only one food that is broken down in the stomach, and that is protein. No other food is broken down in the stomach. Now, let me draw the lining of the stomach to show you how this happens. The lining of the stomach is coated with big folds, and these folds are lined with gastric glands, and 2/3 of these gastric glands release mucus. Now that causes a thick mucosal wall to line the stomach, and that's important because that protects the stomach from the gastric enzymes that are released down here, which is hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen. Hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen unite only in an acid environment, and they release pepsin. And pepsin is the enzyme that breaks down starch. Pepsin is the enzyme that breaks down protein. So pepsin breaks down protein. Now the reason why pepsin is not released here is because it could start to eat away at your stomach lining. And so God designed it such so that the pepsinogens released, the hydrochloric acids released, they connect together only in an acid environment, by the way, and then pepsin is released. And pepsin only works in a very acid environment. So if someone says to me, I've got a very acid stomach, I say, fantastic, it should be. It's actually the only part of our body that should be acid, is the stomach. Now while we're here, let me talk a little bit about hydrochloric acid. As you can see, hydrochloric acid is very important to unite with pepsinogen to release the pepsin. Hydrochloric acid has a few other roles. Hydrochloric acid is a very strong antifungal, antibacterial, antimicrobial, so that if any food that comes into the mouth is bad or has microorganisms in it, then the hydrochloric acid can kill them. In fact, the only people really that get food poisoning are people with low hydrochloric acid, because if our hydrochloric acid levels were as they should be, they would be able to immediately eliminate any harmful pathogens. So it is protein that gets broken down in the stomach. What would interfere with the breakdown of the protein in the stomach? Low hydrochloric acid. What would cause low hydrochloric acid? What would cause low hydrochloric acid would be drinking with our meals. You see, if a person drinks with their meals, they immediately begin to neutralize the acid condition in the stomach. And the stomach actually has to stop digesting, get rid of that water, bring the pH back to the pH that it was, which is down. You see, the pH should be about 2.5. And you put water in there, it'll bring it up to 3.5 or even even up to 0.4. It can bring, if you put water in the stomach, it can bring 2.5 up to 3.5 or even up to 4. And pepsin will not break down protein in that environment. So it's very important not to drink with the meals. Also very important to leave a break between the meals. You see, digestion averages 3 to 4 hours. And then the stomach loves a rest of 1 hour. That means we should leave 5 to 6 hours between meals. Now, there's only one way that you can do that, and that is to have a meal that is high in fibre. You see, fibre binds up the glucose and slowly releases it. We should be eating a food program that is generous in protein. And the reason why protein keeps the food in the stomach longer is because that's where protein is broken down. And the best protein are your vegetarian, your plant proteins like legumes and nuts, seeds. Also healthy fats. And the reason why the fat keeps the food in the stomach longer is because it coats the food, so it takes a little bit longer for the digestive enzymes to get there, and that's good news. So your best fats are your nuts and your seeds and your olive oil and your coconut oil. These two oils have been used for centuries. You see, these are the two oils that are extracted from the flesh of the plant, so they're quite easily extracted. Women could extract the olive oil in their kitchens with wooden presses because it's extracted from the flesh of the olive. All through the South Pacific Islands, women would be able to extract the coconut oil because it's extracted from the flesh of the coconut. So these are the 3 food groups that keep the food in the stomach longer. They actually give a nice, constant delivery of fuel, which is what every cell in the body needs. So one of the reasons for low hydrochloric acid is people putting food in the stomach every couple of hours. You see, the pyloric sphincter, which is the valve at the bottom of the stomach, it has sensors. And when the food comes in, it has sensors that can sense at what stage it's broken down. When it's broken down, the sensors get the message and pyloric sphincter opens and the food starts to come in. Let's say 2 hours after eating, the person has a pie or a sandwich or a cup of tea and a biscuit, a cup of tea and a cake. Or maybe they're really healthy and it's an apple and a handful of nuts. As soon as it comes in, pyloric sphincter shuts the gate. Something's just come in that's not broken down. Breakfast sits here while morning tea gets broken down, joins breakfast after maybe in an hour and a half and 2 hours, then pyloric sphincter open and starts to take more through. And 2 hours later, lunch. Soon as lunch comes in, pyloric sphincter shuts the gate. Something's just come in that's not broken down. This explains why the research is showing that food, breakfast even, can still be in the stomach at the end of the day. Not all of breakfast, but remnants of breakfast. That's why we need to be eating breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and tea like a pauper, and then we will easily go the distance. Many stomachs wear out because too much food is taken at night. When we sleep, our stomach wants to sleep too. And if we eat breakfast like a king and lunch like a queen and tea like a pauper, I think in America you call it supper. And you know, sometimes paupers don't eat. And that looks after the stomach. Let it rest when you rest at night. Take your water between your meals and not with your meals. Chew very well. Make sure it's a happy environment when you're eating. No controversial issues should be discussed when you're eating a meal. One writer said it like this: cast off care and anxious thought when you sit to dine, because that stops the release of the digestive enzymes. So moving down, we come down to the duodenum. And the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. And the duodenum is an alkaline environment. And a few things are happening in the duodenum. You see, in the duodenum we've got bile from the gallbladder. The gallbladder is a reservoir of bile. It is the liver that makes the bile, and the gallbladder holds the bile there. So gallbladder comes down, the bile duct connects with the neck of the pancreas, and it goes into the duodenum. So let's have a look at what the gallbladder does. What role does it play in the breakdown of the food? And again, it works in an alkaline environment, and the enzyme that is released is bile. And bile breaks down your polyunsaturated fats. So your polyunsaturated fats are often called long-chain fatty acids. So long-chain fatty acids. So they're mostly, those nuts are found in your nuts and your seeds. That's where you'll find your polyunsaturated fats. So what's also happening in the duodenum, so this is a subheading, the duodenum, is we've got some things coming from the pancreas. So if you have a look at my illustration here, the pancreas also is joined to the duodenum. And the pancreas releases pancreatic lipase. And pancreatic lipase is an enzyme that also helps in the breakdown of the polyunsaturated fats. From the pancreas, we've also got pancreatic amylase. Now remember, ptyalin is an amylase. This is, the amylases break down the starches. Starch digestion began in the mouth. It's put on hold, especially when it goes through the acid environment in the stomach. When it comes down to the duodenum, where it's alkaline again, now pancreatic amylase finishes or finalizes the digestion of starch. Again, that's your cereals, your breads, your pastas, cakes, etc. Also from the pancreas is released trypsin. And trypsin is an enzyme that breaks down protein. So this is where your protein digestion is finalized. The pancreas also releases chymotrypsin. And chymotrypsin is the other enzyme that breaks down protein. So you can see starch digestion starts in the mouth, it's put on hold through the acid environment, and then it's finalized with an enzyme from the pancreas called pancreatic amylase is your starch. So starch starts in the mouth and it's finalized by the pancreas in the duodenum. With your fats, it's only your saturated fats that are broken down in the mouth by lingual lipase. They're your short and your medium chain fatty acids. All the other fats are put on hold till they come to the duodenum, and the pancreas releases pancreatic lipase, and the gallbladder releases bile, and they are the two enzymes that work together to break down the long chain fatty acids, basically your polyunsaturated fats. Your protein digestion is begun under the action of pepsin in the stomach, and then when it gets down to the duodenum, the pancreas finalizes the protein digestion with the enzyme trypsin and chymotrypsin. So that's how your digestion happens. Most people don't realize that your digestion is not happening in your stomach. Starch starts in the mouth, is finished in your duodenum. Your saturated fats are in the mouth. Only protein is broken down in the stomach, but even then it's not completely broken down. It is finalized when we come to the duodenum. But as you can see, like by this illustration, your main organ of digestion is the pancreas. And that is why when someone has pancreatic cancer, pancreatitis, they often die from malnutrition. So if someone has pancreatitis, they need digestive enzymes. Let me show you. Pepsin and trypsin and chymotrypsin are proteolytic enzymes. A proteolytic enzyme is the enzyme that breaks down protein. And in the pineapple, there is a substance called bromelain that's found in the core of the pineapple. It is also a proteolytic enzyme. And in the pawpaw, or the papaya, there's an enzyme called papain. And that is also a proteolytic enzyme. And you can buy digestive enzymes that contain bromelain and papain. And they are the proteolytic enzymes that can help someone who's got pancreatic problems to help break down their food. Because none of these foods can be absorbed into the blood until they're properly broken down. Let me show you something else about protein that will help to understand. This is what protein looks like. This is a very simple illustration. There's your protein, and under the action of pepsin in the stomach, protein is broken down to peptides and polypeptides. Now often the peptide and the polypeptide, that is how they travel down here, and then the pancreatic trypsin and chymotrypsin break the peptide down to amino acids, and the polypeptide down to an amino acid and a peptide, and then the peptide's broken down to amino acids. Because it's only as amino acids that it can be absorbed into your blood. Basically, these enzymes are chopping up, like scissors, all the little bonds that hold them together. Now, as we move on, we come to the grand finale of digestion. Where's the grand finale of digestion? It's in the first part of the small intestine. So the small intestine is lined with villi, like this. And in one of the other lectures, I was explaining how the villi is coated with a thick turf wall, and that thick turf wall is made up of bacteria. And the two main bacteria, or permanent bacteria in the gut, are Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidus bacterium. There are trillions of bacteria in the gut, but most of them basically are coming from those two. When a baby is in utero, they have no bacteria in the gut. So basically their gut is what's classified as sterile. But when the baby's born and breathes in the mother's microbes, then these microbes come down and start populating in through the gut. That's why it's so important for a baby to have the colostrum from the mother's breasts in the first few days. You see, the milk doesn't officially come in till about the 3rd day after birth. But the first 3 days, there's a thick, creamy substance made by the breast. It's called colostrum, and it is heavily laden with microbes. If you talk to a farmer, if a calf does not get the mother's colostrum in the first few days from the mother cow, they know that that calf will ever be a sickly calf. Now you apply that to human beings. Very important for baby to get the colostrum in the first few days of life. They're even selling colostrum supplements now. Some say, what do you think of that? Well, I actually don't agree, because it's for the cow, it's not for the human, and the most important time for us to get it is the first few days of our life. Now this basically is where the grand finale of digestion happens. These microbes are responsible for the final breakdown of our nutrients. These microbes, often called the healthy bacteria or the healthy flora, they are also responsible for the absorption of our nutrients through that brush layer, that thick turf wall of microbes, and into the blood. These microbes also play a protective role. So they play a protection role. They are protecting the blood from any harmful microbes that may be in the gut. This thick turf wall also serves as a source of nourishment for the cells that line the gastrointestinal tract. The cells that line the gastrointestinal tract are remade every 3 to 5 days. So one writer called that's the nursery. That's where the new cell is made. It travels up and then away it goes every 3 to 5 days. And this little cell is nourished by this gut flora. So you can see that this gut flora is very, very important. They have found that babies born via caesarean section, they don't have gut flora in their gut, they have skin flora. And they have found that babies born via caesarean section are more prone to allergies. They're not as strong a baby, they're a more sickly a baby. So what can a mother do if she has had to have a caesarean? Well, she can paint her nipple with a little probiotic powder first thing in the morning. And I would do that for a couple of weeks, and that will help encourage the baby's gut to be lined with the proper flora. One British he was a British endocrinologist, and he was an obstetrician, so he was specialising in birth. He maintained that 80% of babies born via caesarean section were unnecessary. He also maintained that 80% of hysterectomies were unnecessary. Sometimes things are done a little bit too soon. You see, women's bodies were made to birth, but it is also a woman's responsibility to be eating nourishing food, to be exercising through her pregnancy, to have adequate water, and to read about birth so that she is educated in what's about to happen to her. And most women would birth a lot easier if they did that. A lot of women just let their bodies go, they don't exercise, they don't eat nourishing food, and so it's very difficult for that body to go through birth. So I feel sorry for doctors, because often they are forced to take these steps because the woman has not looked after herself to be able to do it naturally. I call this the grand finale of digestion. Now let me show you what's in the villi. Inside the villi is a lacteal. That's part of the lymphatic system. And then throughout the villi is the blood capillary network. And these microbes are absolutely essential for the final breakdown, the absorption of the nutrients through to the blood, and protecting the blood from any harmful pathogens that might be in the gut and also for nourishing that gut flora. So what would break down this gut flora? Let's make a list of what can break down gut flora. Antibiotics. One professor of nutrition stated that taking an antibiotic is like dropping an atomic bomb in the gut. What did the atomic bomb do? Basically wiped out the good and the bad. It doesn't distinguish. So antibiotics help to break down that thick flora that's lying in the gut. Also, the contraceptive pill. All your statin drugs, they're your cholesterol lowering drugs. Cortisone. And also a lot of your pain-killing medications. All of these have the ability to compromise the gut flora. Pain-killing meds. All have the ability to break down the gut flora. Now let me show you what happens if the gut flora has been broken down. By the way, let me give you a scenario. I have had quite a few women, pregnant women, contact me and say, Barbara, I have just had a test for strep B. I have strep B. The doctor says I must have an antibiotic drip through my labour. If a woman has an antibiotic through labour, if a woman has antibiotic in her pregnancy, if she's had an antibiotic even in the year before she gives birth, that antibiotic breaks down the gut flora, and so that mother can give a compromised gut flora to the baby. But let me say right now, do you know there is no known case of a baby dying from the mother having strep B? So it is really fair. And let every mother know she does not have to have that antibiotic drip. She can give birth to her baby will not be hurt. So it's important to realise that. Because something even more serious can happen. The baby can be born with compromised gut flora. Now the baby's lost the ability to finally break down, absorb, protect the blood, and nourish the cells. What also is happening too is the baby's now born with a compromised gut flora. Within days of being born, the mother's told that the baby has to be vaccinated against hepatitis B. Do you know, a mother does not have to give her baby that hepatitis B shot. There is no proof that it protects. And by the way, the only people that get hep B are drug addicts and prostitutes. So it basically defies reason to inject a baby with these toxins at such a young age. But if the baby is vaccinated, that's a further compromise of the gut flora. And then the mother's having trouble breastfeeding, and so she is encouraged to feed the baby altered cow's milk, warmed up in plastic bottles in a microwave. Now there are some hormone disrupting substances getting into the milk. The baby's not happy because that cow's milk's not sitting well in the gut. So the mother's told to give the baby Panadol. Baby Panadol further disrupts it. And then at 2 months of age, another vaccination happens, further breakdown. And then at 4 months, the mother's told to start giving the baby rice cereal. And only a week after that, the baby's vaccinated again. The amount of women that have said to me after the 4-month vaccine, the lights went out in their baby's eyes. There are many babies who are vaccinated and have no apparent side effects, but it is still having a blow on the gut flora. And there's research coming out today showing that autoimmune diseases are on the rise when people are in their 30s, 40s, because of the vaccine they had as children. So we need to look after our baby's gut. Let me show you now what can happen with this compromise. Not only is the breakdown, absorption, protection and nourishment being lost, but something now is getting into the blood that should never get into the blood. Let me illustrate. This cell here is a very unhappy cell because it has no nourishment. This cell here is a happy cell because it's getting nourishment from the gut flora. When hybridized wheat breaks down in the gut, it breaks down to glutamorphine. And when cow's milk, especially the altered cow's milk that is found in the supermarket, breaks down in the gut, it breaks down to caseo morphine. Morphine is an opiate derivative. So glutamorphine, caseo morphine. Let me show you now what's happening. So caseo and glutamorphine, here's caseomorphine and here's glutamorphine. They come through here, and this healthy, happy cell has the ability to knock off the morphine, so only gluto and caseo get through. But when gluto and caseomorphine come to this section here, this cell that's not getting nourishment, it's not functioning properly, it does not have the ability to knock off the morphine. So glutamorphine and caseomorphine get through to the blood. They are taken up to the brain. The opiate receptor sites in the brain pick it up, and it's contributing to mental illness. Now you can read about this in Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride's book, Gut and Psychology, and Dr. David Pertmuller's book, Grain Brain. Both of these books are written by doctors with decades of clinical practice up their sleeve. Dr. David Pertmuller, he is a neuroscientist, and he quotes psychiatrists who are taking their schizophrenic patients off wheat and dairy and getting a 50% improvement. Also in the book Stop Alzheimer's Now and Stop Autism Now by Dr. Bruce Fife. He also shows this, but not in as much detail as Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride does. Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut, and he didn't know what I'm showing you here. Science is now showing how the father of medicine was very accurate in what he said. So the gut flora is very, very important, as you can see. So how can you rebuild it if it's been broken down? Number one, eliminate. Eliminate anything that may be causing the breakdown. Number two, stop all wheat, all dairy, and all refined sugar. These three foods are like kerosene to a fire on a gut that doesn't have its proper gut flora. Number three, Psalm 104 verse 14, God gave herbs for the service of man, and the two herbs that coat, soothe and heal the lining of the gut are aloe vera and slippery elm. There is no need to take both together, but there's definitely a need to take them when the gut is not working well. I had a lady come to a presentation I gave like this in New Zealand. When I'd finished the presentation, she said, "Barbara, what you are telling me, no one has ever told me. I have had Crohn's disease for 30 years. She said, I go to the bathroom 6 times a day. I am still bleeding, I have pain, and she's on medication. 2 days later, so this was Tuesday night, Thursday night she came up to me and she had a big smile on her face. She said, I'm no longer bleeding. She said, I have no more pain, and my bowel movements have gone from 6 a day down to 3 a day. That's 2 days. 2 days. Very quickly the gut responds because these cells are remade every 3 to 5 days. Most people are not aware of how irritating these 3 foods are to the lining of the gut. So once you start implementing this, the results can happen quite quickly. Coming down to the end of the small intestine, by then most of the nutrients are absorbed. So the only thing really that's coming down here is basically fibre. It is at the last part of the small intestine. This is the ileocecal valve here, so this is called the ileum, and this is where our B12 is absorbed. B12 is a very interesting substance because B12 is locked up with an R protein and hydrochloric acid releases it. But also in the lining of the gut, the intrinsic factor is released. So the B12 released from its R protein and the intrinsic factor basically link halfway down the small intestine, and then they're absorbed just before the end of the small intestine before it goes into the large. Most people with low B12, it's because they have a compromised gut. Maybe they're drinking with their meals, maybe they're eating every couple of hours, and the hydrochloric acid is not high enough to liberate the vitamin B12 from the R protein. Or maybe they're drinking too much with their meals and eating all day long or eating a big meal at night, and so the intrinsic factor's not being released. This is why we always have to put the detective hat on and find out why are these things so. Especially when you meet people, which I have, who are having vitamin B12 injections every couple of months. There's something wrong. What's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. Notice, just as we're going into the large intestine, the appendix is there, and God didn't make a mistake when He put the appendix there. One lady told me that she had to have her right ovary out. So that's, the appendix is on your right side. She had to have her right ovary out because it had some cysts on it. And when she was recovering and the doctor came in, he said, "Oh, by the way, I took your appendix out too." Whew. He has no right to do that. We need these body parts. He just thought, while I'm there, now it won't cause you any problems. But the appendix is important. The appendix has two main roles. One of its name is the colon's oil can, because it lubricates the contents to take it through with a lot more ease. It also releases antibacterial fluid. And if what's coming out of the small intestine is pretty toxic, then the appendix needs to release a lot of antibacterial fluid. Well, what would be toxic? Dogs can get away with eating meat because their gastrointestinal tract is probably only about 1.5 meters long. Ours is 8 meters long. So by the time meat gets all the way down here, it's starting to putrefy. Now that's pretty toxic. And if the person had a glass of wine and say a bowl of ice cream, sugary, milky ice cream, that's further causing toxicity. So what's coming out of here, it's pretty nasty. And so the appendix releases antibacterial fluid to calm it down while it gets through and finally comes out. That's why if someone insists on eating meat, I say you've got to eat a lot of vegetables to try and get that through quickly. Now, one of the main functions of the large intestine is to take water out, so stools are formed, because the matter when it comes from the small into the large intestine basically is liquid. And so what the large intestine does is it takes water out, so by the time we're getting down to the end of the descending colon, this is the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon. By the time it gets down there, then it begins to have form. Now, if the person chewed too fast, big lumps come into the stomach, they're drinking with their meals, so the protein's not getting broken down properly. They come to the duodenum, and trypsin and trimotrypsin come along, but they can't do a lot because the protein hasn't had its first breakdown. And so the protein doesn't even get absorbed into the gut. It comes into the large intestine, partially digested protein. The large colon then has to create a lot of bacteria to try and calm it down so that it won't hurt you and get it through. And they are finding now that people that live on antacids, a lot of antacids, of course, stop protein digestion, they're finding that they're getting colon cancer. For years and years, the protein hasn't been able to be broken down. It gets down to here, and then the colon has to create a lot of bacteria to try and calm it down. Notice with the colon, there are lots of little grooves in and around the colon. When a person is having a refined diet of white bread, white pasta, white cereal, lots of sugar biscuits and meat, none of those things have fibre. So it's very easy for them to get caught, especially in these. This is called the hepatic flexure, this is called the splenic flexure, and things get caught in there and they can actually start to rot and break down. You'll find countries that are high meat eaters, they have the highest incidence of colon cancer. My daughter's neighbour had colon cancer. He eats all refined foods, lots of meat. He's an accountant. He sits at the desk all day. He doesn't drink water because he doesn't want to have to keep going to the bathroom. So that is a recipe for colon cancer. This colon needs to be swept every day and fibre sweets it. This colon also needs to be stimulated so it keeps moving, and that's what the fibre does. So by the time we get down to the last part of the small intestine, then we have stools formed. Now if the person's dehydrated, more water gets taken out than should be taken out. Now we're left with cement and rabbit pellets, and very hard to come out. Notice here there's a loop, and that part of the colon is held up by a muscle called puborectalis, and we're very glad for puborectalis because puborectalis prevents incontinence. And when a person sits on the throne like this, puborectalis remains firm. But if a person squats, and you can mimic the squatting position by buying a little stool. When the person squats, and there are many countries in this world that still, they squat. And it's the most natural position to when you go to the bathroom. The puborectalis now relaxes. And when puborectalis relaxes because of the squatting position, then the colon opens. And when the colon opens, it's a lot easier to come out. Forgive my drawing, I'm not a great drawer. We better put the head up here, I think, and make it a little bit more realistic. You can also, I think it's Bed Bath & Beyond is a shop in America. They sell squatty potties now. And squatty potty is a little stool that sits around the toilet. So for people with constipation, for people who have hemorrhoids, for people who have any problems with the colon, the squatty potty is a very good investment. But even if you don't have any problems, if you get into the habit of using the squatty potty, then you can prevent many problems. So that is the journey, ladies and gentlemen, through our gastrointestinal tract. I have endeavoured to make it as simple as possible, but what I have been talking about is you. And I believe it's one of the most neglected parts of education is knowing something about the house that we live in, knowing something about the body and how it works. Knowledge on the gastrointestinal tract is vital, because this is where we get the nutrients out of our food. Some people are eating a lot of protein, but they're not actually accessing it because they're drinking with their meals and they're eating every couple of hours. Many personal trainers and doctors tell people to eat every couple of hours. But one of our most modern authors, his name is Dr. Michael Mosley, he's written a book called Fast Diet. And it's one of the only modern authors that I've read of that's saying, no, we need to have breaks between our meal. It's called fast diet because he says fast between the meals. It's really not a fast. Most digestion happens in 3 to 4 hours, and then our stomach needs a 1 hour rest. You're not going to die of starvation in that hour, because as you can see by what I've shown you, even when the stomach's empty, the food's being absorbed in the small intestine. Your cells are still getting that. Many people that get hungry 2 hours after a meal, it's because they're thirsty, and the body often doesn't know the difference between thirst and dehydration. My son Peter came to me once, I think he was 15, he said, "Mum, the water's not doing it anymore." I looked at my clock and said, "Great, it's lunchtime. It's time to eat." And that's what you will find. In my home, when my little grandchildren there, if they don't want to drink before breakfast, I say, sorry, sweetheart, you won't be able to have breakfast. But you know what you'll find? I do this with my grandchildren. They have half a glass of water, and then they can have a crystal of Celtic salt, and they love that. And then another glass of water. Because you notice, if you don't get your children to drink half an hour before the meal, as soon as they've finished eating, they want to drink. It's because they're thirsty. A lot of digestive juices, obviously, are made from water. So if you're dehydrated, you're not going to be able to digest your food properly. So please, have a respect for these delicate organs of digestion that God has given us, because right physical habits promote not only mental superiority, but long life and strengthen the human body.